Hi, everybody. My name is Mark, and I am a senior at the University of Alaska Southeast in Juneau. I'm wrapping up my degree in geography and environmental studies. And for this project on History Pin, I focused on representation and mobility. So I'd like to thank you all for taking a look at our History Pin project. It's titled Scaling the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline. It is on History Pin. And I'd like to talk about a couple of specific pins that I worked on. And I feel that they're pretty good examples of representation, especially when it comes to geographies of emotion, which I'm very interested in. These pins, they represent a scaling down of the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline down to the personal level. So the first one I wanted to take a look at with you. It's this one right here. This one's entitled Hit 'em Where It Hurts. And I think this pin is pretty important. If we click on the pin here, we can take a look at it. This pin is pretty important in my opinion because it represents the direct impact that the Trans-Alaskan Pipeline has had on the Alaskan Native population. And in this case, it impacted this tribe, the Tuti tribe, Copper Valley, Copper Center, I'm sorry, they go by another name called Copper Center also. So what happened here was this village got tired of seeing a lot of traffic from the Alaska Pipeline Company coming in. The village elders and people started realizing that there were things going on that had never taken place before on their land. There was increased alcoholism, vandalism, racism, even. So what the assembly, the tribal assembly did, they implemented what they called a business activity tax. Now this taxed any Alaska Pipeline equipment or workforce coming onto their land. Of course, this didn't go too well with the big oil companies, and they did take them to court. And the oil companies won, of course. They've got a lot of money. They've got the lawyers and the ability to do this. But I feel it's really important because even though the ruling didn't come out in favor of the tribe, the action taken by the tribe was a form of protest. It was a tactic to counter the strategy that big oil had placed on their land in direct relation to the Trans-Alaska Pipeline. So this is one that I really liked, and I'm glad I came across it. They've been through there's been a lot of battles with the Trans-Alaska Pipeline with smaller villages. And it's, I think it's a nice form of protest, and I really I'm glad that I ran into this particular piece of information there. So I'd like to go on to another one that I've worked on. And as you go through here, you can kind of look at how I'm doing this on History Pen. This one right here, Martha's Fears. So this is one that allows us to scale down to the person. And I want to draw special attention to how oil production and the pipeline have disproportionately affected the Native community. So this village, excuse me if I butcher this, Nukaset sits about 8 miles from the oil production rig that blew out in 2012. So harmful pollutants were carried by the wind, and sometimes they form a black covering over the ice that they get there. And so in 2012, the blowout caused respiratory issues with many of the village residents. The village residents are also concerned with the environmental impacts of the pollution produced due to the oil production. And climate change, of course, is transforming the environment at a disproportionate rate. and they are concerned that this will further impact the availability of wildlife that they've depended on for food. Another interesting fact is that the oil companies are responsible for the air quality monitoring and not the village. So that's kind of concerning. Within this article, they actually tried to set up their own air quality monitoring. Um, and they had actually got some people to help. I'm not sure if it was Rule Cap or not. I don't recall. It's in the article. Um, and when they were going to implement their own air quality testing, they had some opposition in the form of board members coming in saying that they did not want environmentalists in there. So initially, this was meant to keep the air quality testing in the hands of the oil company. In which case, the oil company is always saying, "Nope, the air is really good. It's great. You know, it's above normal." However, people like Martha here she has kids, and when that blowout happened in 2012, of course there was a trip to the hospital because of the asthma and other things that affected the respiratory issues for them. So yeah, and let's see. So there's one more that I wanted to go over with you. So in this class, I also took on not only representation in the forms of emotional geographies and scaling down to the personal level. I also wanted to highlight mobility, and specifically for me, uh, mobility as a form of privilege. So in this case, I wanted to take a look at this pin that I did. I entitled it "The Ice Ship" because that's what it was called in the article and the research that I was doing on it. And yeah, so as I look at the mobility of oil companies and their ability to move such large equipment across frozen land, and in some cases making their own roads, that's amazing over this, frozen land. And where there is no roads, they make their own roads. Now that's a lot of power. So in this case, they moved this 2.2 million pound rig across the entire Dalton Highway. It had to be the entire highway had to be closed, and also they had to build a 30-mile ice road and had to cut through the landscape to get from the Charlie 1 point to the Dalton Highway. So that's just one leg of it. Since the rig was moved fully assembled, a work crew had to remove 1,500 roadside markers in 30 below weather conditions to keep them from getting crushed. And I feel this is a very powerful representation and example of what mobility by the privileged looks like. This rig was massive, and just to get this, from point A to point B, on a good day, is probably pretty treacherous. But having it done in 30 below weather with a ground crew taking out these side markers on the highway, they had to take them out and lay them down on the ground so they wouldn't get crushed. That's a lot of manpower. That's a lot of work. So they were able to move this at a very slow rate. They were going 1.8 miles an hour. It took a total of 28 hours to reach Prudhoe Bay. So that's a lot of privilege and mobility, I feel. And I don't know, I often think about, what the normal people do sometimes on days like this when they have to go down this highway. It must be pretty treacherous, but for the oil company, they can just build a road and get there. So yeah, so I want to thank you guys for taking the tour of these pins with me. I hope you explore the rest of the pins. We worked really hard on them, and I think you'll find them very enlightening. And History Pin is a living document, so that means that anybody can go on here and do some research and find some interesting pins that relate to the Trans-Alaska pipeline, and share your information. Make a pin, get on there and do it. If there was one thing that I could do over again, I'd probably go back and probably find more interviews or get interviews with people whose lives have been affected directly by the pipeline, in some way or another. But hey, maybe that's where you come in. and take that little piece over. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I will hopefully see some pins up pretty soon. Take care.